G'day, I'm Rob, and you're listening to Don't Read the Comments. And I'm very sure for this edition, there'll be some people out there who see Don't Read the Comments and the topic of this episode and will put two and two together and get five and think it's about a specific interaction, shall we say, that happened out there in internet land when the Doctor Who author and Doctor Who books range editor Justin Richards passed away recently. There were a lot of lovely comments about Justin. However, one particular person out there took it upon themselves to say something quite silly. This is a person who is revered as an oracle on some podcasts out there and reviled on other podcasts, so they are divisive to begin with. They went out with quite an ill-timed comment, a comment that might have been an interesting conversation piece a year or two from now, maybe. But on the day of someone's passing, to reply to a group of people who knew Justin Richards personally and to say what they did was quite dumb. Let's just leave it at that. This episode is not about that. This is Don't Read the Comments, a very irregular podcast that we put out on the Doctor Who show feed, where I take a topic that's been commented on out there, and I read the comments and comment on the comments. And this time around, it is sadly Justin Richards passing away a week ago, a little over a week ago actually, if we take into account that it was private for a few days before it was publicly announced. He had a battle with early-onset fronto-temporal dementia, very sadly, and he was only 64, and there are, as I say, a lot of nice comments out there about him, and I'd like to read some now. Tonight we're on the Gallifrey section of Reddit, and Temporal Spleen says, "Ah, dang, I had no idea he was even ill. He wrote some great stuff for Big Finish. His work on Jago and Lightfoot was a highlight, and he was one of the writers of the early Gallifrey audios, a personal favourite of mine. Not to mention Theatre of War, the NA, and its audio adaptation, which was the first appearance of Irving Braxiatel. He was a great writer, and he'll be sorely missed." Nokron says, "One of the best Doctor Who writers there has ever been. His editorial run on the EDAs is, in my opinion, the greatest run of Doctor Who ever released." Some big praise there. Ribos1 says, "His reference books, particularly Monsters and Villains, were a big part of my childhood, and I know I'm not alone in that. Very sad to hear." And I'll stop there. Ribos1 raises an interesting point. Justin wrote all sorts of things as well as fiction, including these reference-style books, which for fans of my age and older were things, they weren't written for us. So they're things that we may be aware of, we may have seen in stores, we may see people talk about online, but we've never experienced them because they just weren't for us. And it does show people like me that Justin wrote and edited things like the EDAs. That's something we're talking about already here in these comments, which are very, very important. They're things that I've read, many of you have read. But he also wrote these other things that younger fans coming up, fans who only got into Doctor Who in 2005 or even later than 2005, were reading. And to them, his name is very important because it's on those books that we just don't own, don't even know about sometimes. And that just shows the length and breadth of his importance to many fans. Zagreus Time says, "Rest in peace. Enjoyed several of his books and probably other contributions to Doctor Who I'm less aware of. The Clockwise Man really caught my attention as a kid, and whilst definitely aimed at a young demographic, the lesser-known Darksmith legacy kept me reading in school and gave me a Doctor Who fix in between the Tennant seasons." And there you go, there's another younger person writing. Cousin Justine says, "It's hard to imagine now, but there was a period of about 5 years where Justin Richards was the guy heading up Doctor Who at the BBC. The Burning and the Banquo Legacy are both outstanding novels, and some of my favourites in the range. Rest in peace." Avan Tarklu says, "Awful news, an absolute pillar of the Doctor Who expanded universe. Looking through his very long list of stories, the one that I have the most fondness for is The Bloodless Soldier, the first story of the Jago and Lightfoot series. Wonderful piece of writing." Mondalisa Rice says, "Oh my god, that is so sad. Martha in the Mirror was one of my favourite Doctor Who books when I was a kid. And it's funny, I'm actually reading Martha in the Mirror at the moment. The day that Justin's sad news was announced, I thought, I'm going to read a nice, light, breezy NSA. And I looked at what I was up to in the range, picked up the very next book in the range. It was Martha in the Mirror. It's a Justin Richards novel. The universe, as I said on Twitter at the time, has a very, very strange sense of humour sometimes. Zabi12 says, pretty incredible looking through the list of his work and finding pretty much every piece of extended universe Doctor Who media that captured my attention as a kid. Shout out to Blind Fury in particular, a story from one of the annuals that, to this day, I think of all the time. I honestly think what I read of Justin's work then shaped my love of this series as much, if not more than, the show itself. That's some very high praise. Professor Rev says, gutted. One of the few writers where his name on it was a seal of quality. I wondered for years why he didn't get the gig for Enemy Lines, but if he was unwell, that explains a lot. I'm not sure where they are rights-wise, but I wonder if that's why Brax has been absent from releases. And that's a good question. I do not know the answer to that. And finally, Cake IQ says, wow, I didn't know he was suffering with dementia. I remember downloading all of the Eighth Doctor adventures onto my Kindle when I was 16 and had just watched the 96 movie and become obsessed. Those books provided a lot of fun and comfort during tough times and made me appreciate both the Eighth Doctor and Doctor Who a hell of a lot more. Rest in peace. And all these comments are, I think, indicative of what I was seeing across the board. There was that one piece that I mentioned at the start of this show, which was an absolute outlier. There was no one even remotely commenting anything like that, which made it all the more extraordinary. And the way it was excoriated by fandom, I think, was quite a good thing. Let's leave it at that. So, Wale Justin Richards, my own memories of the guy are... Obviously, I was very much an EDA fan. Listeners to our podcast will know Dave was the NAs and MAs guy, and I was the EDAs and PDAs guy. And we're changing that. Dave's getting into the EDAs quite a bit lately, which is very good. But because of that, I knew of Justin Richards. I'd read Justin Richards' novels and so on, going back, a quarter of a century ago. So this news certainly hits me hard, and to think he was only in his 60s. Yeah, it's just so incredibly young, so incredibly sad, a wonderful talent taken away from us. Some are even calling him the modern-day Terrence Dicks. I don't think that's too much of a stretch, actually. His very simple, not in a bad way, simple prose style, wonderful concepts. You can certainly see what people mean when they say that. Again, Wale Justin Richards... This has been Don't Read the Comments. If you have any more thoughts on Justin Richards, why don't you get them into us and we'll read them on our monthly show at the end of this month. Until then, though, I've been Rob, and I'll catch you next time, somewhere, on the Doctor Who Show. Don't read the comments.